Story time. Is it harder to do a good job of defending a person if you personally think their story is full of holes? Excellent question that has reminded me of a case that I was involved in very early in my career. It was actually my first full defended hearing. The facts are that a pair of neighbors get into a scuffle outside of their property on, ironically, Friendship Street. It is alleged that my client shoves the elderly neighbor, and when she shoves her, the elderly neighbor falls and injures her leg. As I'm discussing things with my client, taking instructions, my client is adamant that the reason she did this is because she was acting in self-defense, notwithstanding the fact that these two have a long-standing, we don't like each other type of relationship. And when I pushed her on what self-defense she was referring to, she told me the following: my neighbor is a witch who has magical powers and has the ability to curse people, including myself. And the curse requires her to say certain words, point her fingers, and that's how the curse works. And so she felt like she had no choice but to push this person so the curse wouldn't happen. Now, to me, this was absurd. It was a ridiculous story that made no sense whatsoever. But it's not my job to judge. So I took her version down. We call this proofing. I took her version down and I got, signed instructions. And in the hearing, it was my job to cross-examine the victim. And fairly early into my examination, I asked her, do you possess magical powers? Fully expecting the answer to be no, when in fact she looks me dead in the eye and goes, yes. Now that was a shock to me, to the prosecutor, and to the magistrate. So much so that we all kind of paused, and it was, even though it was a ridiculous question, nobody objected. And so now that that had opened up, I started asking her more questions. And she conceded that she was a witch, that she did have magical powers, and that she had the power to make a specific curse, one that could make women infertile, and that on the day in question, this woman had deserved the wrath and was about to have that curse cast on her. Now, self-defense is a subjective and objective test, so my client perceived the danger that she was under, and she, on our version, pushed someone. The person fell over. She didn't strike her when she was on the ground, nothing of the sort. And so she was acquitted. Now, I thought their story was ludicrous. It made no sense to me whatsoever, but it was my job to tell it. And thankfully I did. And how lucky am I that that was my first hearing, which I ran on my own, because it got rid of all of my preconceived notions of the world has to run a certain way. So yes, it is convenient and easier to understand if a person's story makes sense. But if it doesn't, I'll still tell it anyway, even if it's full of holes. Follow me for more legal TikTok.